I preach on this podcast and in my life to love everyone and accept everyone. But I also have noticed that I do, when people are doing something that I really don't agree with, I dismiss them way too quickly. And I'm trying really hard to really accept people, even if they believe opposite of me, and even if they think opposite of me. And I think a lot of times that's within the church.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's easy to hear things that people say that I don't necessarily believe in, or that I haven't subscribed to growing up or whatever, that are from different churches, because they grew up extremely differently than me. Right. Yeah. But it's harder for me when people grew up in the church and I know what they were taught and they believe differently than me. It's much easier for me to be judgmental of them.
It is incredibly stretching.
Yeah.
And difficult to be in community with people that you totally disagree with. And, and I think maybe we can do better at disagreeing and disagreeing well with people.
Welcome back to That's Church, where we're exploring faith, embracing spirituality, and fostering unity. Venice, thank you so much for doing this again. I'm so excited to talk to you again. I really loved your talk on Sunday, or during Mother's Day. I guess it was a couple Sundays ago, but it was so good. And I realized you are such a good storyteller. So I was like, Kate, and you shared a beautiful poem. And so I was like, Kate, we need to hear more stories. Like, you're so good at telling them.
Person that sticks out to me, he was sort of one of the prominent members of the ward and that I was a regular in New York City. And he was just so incredible because he was one of those people where you couldn't really be around him without just feeling like you were in a big hug all the time, He was so kind and had some real dad energy, laughed really easily, and he was just a great guy. But he and his family, they had lived elsewhere. And then they just felt inspired to move to New York City because they felt like there were a lot of people there that they could serve easily and that they could be around and love. And so he and his family moved to New York City, and it's not exactly easy to have kids in New York City.
Yeah.
Because they felt like they were inspired to do it. And he just talked a lot about all of the opportunities that they were just presented with to love people and to serve them.
How old was he? I'm just curious.
He, he's one of those people where it's like it could be one end of the spectrum or the other. So
yeah.
But
okay, that's fine. I was just trying to picture him and he has dad energy. Like, is he like your dad, or is he like,
yeah, like not old enough to be my dad, but his kids were like older-ish, like teenagers, teens and stuff. He was a convert, and he said that he had investigated the church for a long time. Like, he was one of those people that all of the missionaries knew if you had served in that area and taught him. And finally he was at a point where he was like, you know what, I'm ready to be baptized. I'm super into this. And then he was doing something with some other ward members, and someone in the ward, and I think maybe they had, it was like the elders quorum president or something, someone with a like fairly substantial calling. He had made a comment that was fairly homophobic. It was something about how, gay people were going to go to hell or something similar. And this brother, the one that I met in New York City, he was so shocked by that, and he had no idea that was really sort of part of church rhetoric or belief or anything like that. And he was deeply, deeply shocked. And he sort of he went home and was frustrated. And then he called the missionaries to cancel his baptism because he didn't really want to be a part of a church like that. And it was really hard on him because he felt like he had finally gotten to this place where he was ready to get baptized. And then, some nasty stuff came out. And one of the missionaries that was teaching him said, "You know what? I totally respect your decision. I want you to make the decision that's right for you. But can we just go to lunch and sort of talk through things one more time before you make a final decision?" And so he agreed. And this elder that was teaching him, and this is in the 90s, I think, mind you. So this is, before it was cool to be an ally, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
But this elder, and I just respect and admire him so much because this was not part of a regular narrative that we heard back then. But he just said, I actually got a letter from one of my best friends back home recently. He just returned from his mission. And he wrote me this letter saying that he wanted to let me know that he was gay and that he wasn't in the church anymore. Like, he couldn't be in the church anymore. And he just kind of wanted to let me know so that I wasn't so shocked when I came home. And the friend was maybe almost apologetic in his letter, saying yeah, sorry, I, couldn't hack it. You probably think less of me, whatever. But this elder was also kind of shocked by that and really just wrote him back and said, "You're still the same person that I've been good friends with. This doesn't change anything for me. I don't believe that you are going to hell or that this means you're a bad person or anything like that." It's kind of hard to, say much more than that because the church still teaches what it teaches. So I wish I could say that, things were going to be awesome either way in the church or out of the church. But mostly he just said, "I just want you to know that I am standing with you, that I know that you're not a bad person, and that I really love you." And they just kind of talked about that. And this brother, the one that I met in New York City, he um, he just kind of felt the comfort of the Spirit and just realized, yeah, there are always going to be problematic things in the church and out of the church. And that's just in some ways part of life, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But it's up to each of us to kind of decide what we're going to do with that and to decide what type of example we are going to set and the type of life that we're going to live. And, he just, again, he was one of those people that just exuded love and service. And it was just his whole life and his whole way of being. And he, he had his own kids that were part of the LGBTQ community. But he just still really was very adamant about the church being the best possible way that he could serve people and sort of the best base that he had for being a person of service and love. So it was just such a beautiful example. Interviewing him, I was just crying during my interview with him because he's just such a beautiful person, and it really was just an honor to meet so many people like that who, have their own complex stories and their own complex feelings about being a member of the church. But he was very solid in where he was because he had a solid relationship with God and kind of knew what his own values and his own calling was, so to speak.
Wow, that's awesome. Was he baptized before he had kids?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. I was just curious if he knew that his kids were part of the LGBTQ community before or at that point. Interesting.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's really cool that he was in a space to accept and love them. like his kids when they were ready to come out to him. And that's neat.
And it's, I want to be clear. That's not to say that, they haven't had their difficulties in navigating the church world,
Yeah.
But yeah, their parents are really loving and open and just good people. So yeah.
That's beautiful. Very cool. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. This is sort of my favorite quote to use from the research because I think it sums everything up really nicely, but also it just, this is another one that kind of makes me emotional. But one woman that I interviewed, she was kind of telling me about a time in her life when she didn't really feel like she belonged in her ward. She didn't really feel like she was getting much out of it. And it was kind of a time of reckoning for her, maybe a little bit. Nothing wildly serious, but she really just kind of had to dig deep and ask herself, what am I doing here? Like, what am I getting out of this? What's in it for me? Which I think is a valid question. But ultimately, she said, this is what she told me. She said, I really realized that church wasn't about what I could get out of it as much as what I could give. I mean, hopefully you go to church and you do receive spiritual nourishment, but the nice thing is if your expectation is just that you're there to give to other people, then you're not disappointed so frequently, You're there trying to scan the crowd and see, is there anyone that looks sad or is there anyone that looks lonely? And I mean, I know this woman really well, and she is also one of those people that just exudes love and kindness and goodness, and she is always scanning the crowd and trying to search for someone who needs someone, And I think church really is a perfect place to do that because we're put in community with people that we disagree with, that we might not naturally gravitate towards in normal social situations. You're put in community with people you might not otherwise come into contact with. And it really is a perfect opportunity to just look around and see outside of our own self-improvement. Self-improvement is great. Big fan. It, I think, is something we should focus on in this life. But ultimately, if we're going to church just thinking, what can I get out of this? How is this going to make me better? How is this going to make me more righteous and me more amazing? Then maybe we're missing the point a little bit. I think if we go to church and we start looking around and at other people and stop worrying about ourselves and our own righteousness, our own reputation, our own standing, if you look around and try to see who's hurting and who might need someone, then I think that's the real purpose of church.
Love it. I'm jealous you get to meet all of these amazing people. Although I don't know why I'm saying that because I get to meet amazing people on this podcast as well. Which is why, like, after being interviewed by you, I was like, I want to interview people. Like, you kind of were the catalyst for that, and it's happening, and it's amazing, and I'm happy for both of us. But I was just gonna say, with that, we went to a Unitarian Universalist church this last weekend. And it was so interesting. It was very different. It's called a society, not a church. And the lady that I sat next to, she said, I'm atheist and my husband's atheist. And she said they talk about God sometimes in the services here and sometimes they don't. It doesn't seem to be centered around God. It seems to be very inclusive, whatever you believe. And she said, one thing that she said that was kind of sad was she said, I wish my kids had had this when they were growing up because we live in a very predominantly LDS community, neighborhood, state, all through their growing up, and they didn't belong to any religion. And she said they really could have used that support, and they did kind of feel like outsiders being LDS. But she decided to come to start attending this service and this society because she just wanted to connect with people and find ways that she could serve people, which I thought was so great. And she was just as she was telling me about it, everything she told me about was something she could do for someone else. Like she's like, they sometimes do a service or do a feed the homeless kitchen type of thing, and they can sign up to volunteer for it. And they sometimes do activities where they get together and they just discuss things as adults, and just kind of go back and forth on a topic. And anyway, it was really amazing, and it kind of made me think differently as well. Similar to your friend, that it doesn't have to be about me. And I think I've always been good at that in the church. I think I've stepped back from like service opportunities in the church because I feel like my service is being done elsewhere right now. But I think that there's no lack of opportunity in our church, and service is very like not pushed, but it's prominent in our church, but I really hadn't thought about it as in my struggles. Like in my struggles with the church, I really hadn't stepped back to think, well, what can I do for others? It doesn't have to be about me, and if it fits the mold for me, or if it fits my own ideals, every single time. So anyway, I've really been thinking a lot about the fact that I preach on this podcast and in my life to love everyone and accept everyone. But I also have noticed that I do, when people are doing something that I really don't agree with, I dismiss them way too quickly. And I'm trying really hard to really accept people, even if they believe opposite of me. And even if they think opposite of me, and I think a lot of times that's within the church.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to hear things that people say that I don't necessarily believe in, or that I haven't subscribed to growing up or whatever, that are from different churches because they grew up extremely differently than me.
Right. Yeah.
But it's harder for me when people grew up in the church and I know what they were taught and they believe differently than me. It's much easier for me to be judgmental of them. So anyway, thank you.
It is incredibly stretching.
Yeah.
And difficult to be in community with people that you totally disagree with. And, and I think maybe we can do better at disagreeing and disagreeing well with people. But I think ultimately you kind of have to be in community, in a community of love and mutual respect before someone would even think about changing their mind anyways. And and it is interesting because like the closer they are to your own experience, the harder it can be to be empathetic with them. Different views.
And I recently was editing an episode where we were talking about how sometimes it's not about agreeing with or changing someone's mind. It's not about changing someone's mind all the time, but trying to understand them and trying to just see them and see what they're about. And so I'm trying really hard to do that, and not just and I can't fully understand everyone either, but just listen. Like you were saying, like you were talking about listening to people in our previous episode. You were talking about listening to people that are struggling. And I think it can also be a challenge or a goal. It's a goal now of mine to listen to people that aren't, or that don't understand what it's like to struggle, or don't understand what it's like to be an outsider. I can still listen to them also, and accept them fully. Totally. And also be like, there's some people that have like accounts, Instagram accounts or platforms that I don't totally agree with, but I can see that they're doing good for the people that listen to them, or that follow them. So I want to go to them and be like, you're doing something really good, even though it's not something I follow or I enjoy, and I can still follow it as well and just see who they are,
Yeah.
and not agree with it. And that's fine.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to find that balance,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
still love people. And I was just, sorry, I'm taking over this. I didn't
No,
mean
it's
to,
great.
but I just today, you just sparked something. I just today got together with a friend that I love dearly, and I've known her for 25 years, and she's a beautiful human. And I've always just loved her to death. She doesn't live in this state. She lives pretty far away, but I've seen her quite often. We get together whenever we can, whenever she's in town or I'm in town. And today she said some things that I made me realize, oh, we don't see things eye to eye. Like, you actually believe some things that are extremely different than me.
Yeah.
And we both grew up in the church. We both, have been very strong LDS. And now I realized, oh, it's me that's changed. It's not her. And I kind of had to stop myself from being like, oh, shoot, and like pulling away from her.
Yeah.
And be like, wait, this is still her. I still love her. And she's still the same person. She didn't change. I changed,
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean, just because she thinks some different thoughts does not mean that I need to think about her differently,
Right.
So anyway, that was a test for me today, because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And then I had that situation today, and I was like, wait, this is my opportunity. And I felt my heart distancing, and I was like, nope, don't do that.
Yeah.
And I feel like I passed the test for myself.
Good job. Wow.
Thank
It's
you.
very impressive.
You.
I know. I'm not good at I can preach it, but I still really struggle with this. And I've gotten a lot better over time, and I'm hoping that I'll still get better over time. But it's something, I just think it's part of life, that we'll all sort of be working on for a long time.
Yeah.
Being non-judgmental. And it's really easy to be judgmental of the people that are judgmental, and then you realize it's you, and then
Yeah.
come back around. But yeah, and I think especially at church, sometimes we can be like, oh, I will be happy when we kind of procrastinate our happiness, in the sense that we're like, I will be happy and satisfied and be comfortable at church once everyone has been enlightened like me.
Mm-hmm.
Like once everyone thinks the way that I think, then we'll be cooking with gas.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I actually think that's another one of the main points of church and being in community, is being with people that are difficult to love,
Mm-hmm.
and to love them anyways. Because like, maybe I've said this before, but church is not about just sitting around and high-fiving each other because we've got it all figured out and no one else does. It's about, the struggle, and being and supporting each other in the struggle. And
Mm-hmm.
it's difficult to do. There's that, oh, I have to Google this now because I'm going to get the quote wrong, but there's like a common saying that, oh, okay, there's a common saying that's something along the lines of, the point of religion is to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable.
Oh,
So, which I think is really
love
true.
it.
I think we
Yes.
need to serve each other, and we need to, maybe get off our high horse a little bit and realize that we don't know it all. And church is a perfect place to kind of come into contact with people and experiences that maybe wake us up a little bit to how much we
Mm-hmm.
still need to work on.
Yeah, for sure. I was telling somebody recently that I was struggling, or that I was focusing on this, and this was my goal. And they said, we just need Jesus. It's like, that's so
Yeah,
true. But also, we can find Jesus, and we can find God. We can find, I think, I recently have said on this podcast, actually, that I feel like as I've gotten to know people and know other religions, my testimony has been strengthened in my own church.
yeah,
But I've been thinking about that, and I thought, I don't know that that's exactly true. I think my testimony has been strengthened in the gospel.
Mhm.
And I think my biggest takeaway is, and I still have some things that I'm frustrated with in my own church. And I actually, by attending different churches, those things have kind of come to light a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And also there have been things that I've experienced in other churches that have made me really grateful for our church. Yeah. It's done both things. But I think my biggest takeaway is that God loves every person. Yeah. And he will, how did I word this the other day in my mind? He will give every person what they need to be close to him in whatever way they need it in that time, in that time period too, So like, I believe that Mohammed is connected to God. Yeah. I believe that Judaism is connected to God, like and the books, like, I believe all of those books have truth and good in them, and they were just given in a different way to different people at different times, And I think that's my biggest takeaway is, like, God is not a respecter of persons, and he's not going to just be focused on this one small group of people. Yeah. He loves everyone, and also, I don't know that he's just a he. I believe in Heavenly Mother, and I believe, I believe that there's a team, and I think my biggest takeaway with God and who God is that they have to be love. That's like, if it comes from love, then we can access Jesus, because we can love, and we can love no matter what. We can love if they believe like we do. We can love if they don't. We can just love, and we can access God that way, I recently was watching my dog and small children, and I was like, gosh, they just love me. Like, they don't care who I am. They don't care what I believe or what I think. Like, they just love, So if God is love, then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all what we think or what we believe, or, we just need to be us, and we can be loved like our little children and our pets love us, Yeah. Anyway, little tangent there.
100. I love it. That was really beautiful. Thank you.
I've been thinking about all of this a lot lately, and so you got it. You got it all. I really was here just to listen to you, and then you said,
"Well." Love it. I love hearing all of your thoughts, and I totally agree. I mean, I just think, going with this, God loves each of us and wants to communicate and be in relationship with us. And I don't think God is picky about the means to have a relationship with us. Mm-hmm. And I think, maybe some people listening might feel uncomfortable and be like, this is getting into like relativistic territory. But I also think that, God calls us to communities to be in. Yeah, I don't think God is, relativistic. I don't think it's sort of like anything goes, but I believe that we're here to progress, and that, again, one of the best ways to do that is to be in community with other people and to try to find God together.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love how you say in community with people. Because we can be in community in our homes, in our families. We're in community. I mean, it's a huge community in the LDS church. Mm-hmm. And that's a huge blessing. Like, that's huge. And that's a tool that we can use to better ourselves, to help others, to serve others, just to live a more purposeful life. And I've seen that in other communities as well, other religions, other communities that aren't religions. So I really, every time you say in community, I'm like, that just like hits my soul. I really love that. I love the way you say that.
This is a quote from Sister Chako Okazaki. She was in the General Relief Society presidency back in the 90s. She's since passed away, but she's still very beloved. But this is from her book called Lighten Up. And she says, well, my dear sisters, the gospel is the good news that can free us from guilt. We know that Jesus experienced the totality of mortal existence in Gethsemane. It's our faith that he experienced everything, absolutely everything. Sometimes we don't think through the implications of that belief. We talk in great generalities about the sins of all humankind, about the suffering of the entire human family, but we don't experience pain in generalities. We experience it individually. That means he knows what it felt like when your mother died of cancer, how it was for your mother, how it still is for you. He knows what it felt like to lose the student body election. He knows that moment when the brakes locked and the car started to skid. He experienced the slave ship sailing from Ghana toward Virginia. He experienced the gas chambers at Dachau. He experienced napalm in Vietnam. He knows about drug addiction and alcoholism. And then she says, let me go further. There is nothing you have experienced as a woman that he does not also know and recognize. On a profound level, he understands the hunger to hold your baby that sustains you through pregnancy. He understands both the physical pain of giving birth and the immense joy. He knows about PMS and cramps and menopause. He understands about rape and infertility and abortion. His last recorded words to his disciples were, "And lo, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world." He understands your mother pain when your 5-year-old leaves for kindergarten, when a bully picks on your 5th grader, when your daughter calls to say that the new baby has Down syndrome. He knows your mother rage when a trusted babysitter sexually abuses your 2-year-old, when someone gives your 13-year-old drugs, when someone seduces your 17-year-old. He knows the pain you live with when you come home to a quiet apartment where the only children are visitors. When you hear that your former husband and his new wife were sealed in the temple last week. When your 50th wedding anniversary rolls around and your husband has been dead for 2 years. He knows all that. He's been there. He's been lower than all that. He's not waiting for us to be perfect. Perfect people don't need a savior. He came to save his people in their imperfections. He is the Lord of the living, and the living make mistakes. He's not embarrassed by us, angry at us, or shocked. He wants us in our brokenness, in our unhappiness, in our guilt, and in our grief. Anyways, it's making me cry again. It's very difficult for me to read that without crying, but that is what I believe in. I believe in a savior who not only knows generally what it's like to experience something difficult, but he knows what it's like to be me and experience something difficult. That is the ultimate empathy. And I think that's what God is willing to do in order to understand us and comfort us. And we're not in it alone.
So beautiful. I totally agree. Oh, thank you so much. That was amazing. You're so good.
Thank you. You're so good. What a great podcast you guys are doing. I'm just really honored to even know you guys. And anyway, thanks so much.
Same. And you get stuff out of me that just comes out. So thanks for that as well. No, it's good. Stay tuned for our upcoming episode on July 10th, where we interview Pastor Steve, a Lutheran pastor recommended by one of our listeners. He shares his inspiring story about the reconciliation in Christ that his church underwent to accept all, including the LGBT+ community. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at That's Church Podcast for updates and more exciting content.